The first Christmas Julie and I spent together as a married couple, I was convinced it was going to be like one of those Hallmark movies. You know the type. I was going to wear an excessive amount of flannel, more than I currently am, and I was going to find her the perfect gift. And so I scoured the stores and I finally decided what I was going to buy her. It was this gorgeous, about 5 foot tall jewelry armoire. It had two doors on it, a mirror out front, full length. And with that, I decided that I needed and just had to have it. But unfortunately, we were broke. So I went to my parents and borrowed money from them without telling Julie. I know that that was a bad idea now, but let me tell the story. So I kept this huge piece of furniture hidden until Christmas Eve. And I waited until she went to bed, and then I hauled it out and I put it together. That next morning, she woke up and man, she was so surprised. She loved it. It was perfect. I mean, until she saw the bill. You see, it's still sitting in our room next to our closet door. A few years later, we got into a fight. I know that sounds crazy, but we got in a fight. I don't even remember what the fight was about. But it was one of those where it's ended up where both of us are yelling, "Fine, fine." And she slammed the door. And then I started anger cleaning our bedroom. And I picked up one of my dress shoes and chucked it towards the closet, not even thinking about it. But I swear at that moment, as I watched that shoe fly through the air, the whole room went into slow motion as that shoe took a hard left-hand turn and smashed right into the mirror of that jewelry armoire. Of course, the glass is everywhere. The shattered, you could hear it across the house. And so Julie comes running back in. She looks at me and then looks at the mirror and then looks at me. And all she said was, "Really?" And she just walked out. And she jokes to this day that I still did that on purpose. I swear I didn't break it on purpose. I didn't plan to do that. It just happened. And sometimes things don't go the way we expect, right? I mean, I'm guessing for many of us, maybe for you, 2020 hasn't gone according to plan. I mean, you're only crushing it right now if your New Year's resolution was, I decided to spend more time at home. 2020 has brought all sorts of unexpected things. Some of us have lost a job or changed a job. Some of us have gotten sick. Others of us, for 2020, marks the end of a relationship, maybe a friendship or a marriage. This year has been a year of loss. And I mean, it hasn't been easy, has it? And maybe you don't feel like celebrating Christmas. To sit here on Christmas Eve feels weird. Some of our traditions are on hold. Maybe you're not seeing people this Christmas that you normally see. You might be a little bit more anxious than usual. You might be sad or frustrated or even guilty because you're here and not there. We didn't expect this. This is supposed to be the most wonderful time of year, but this year it's a little less wonderful, isn't it? But it doesn't have to be. You see, we aren't the first people to face an unexpected Christmas. We aren't the first to be confused or worried or even stressed out. You see, the first Christmas, the Christmas story, is couched inside of these emotions of fear and confusion. And you can see this when we read Matthew's gospel. Matthew just jumps right into the Christmas story. Luke takes his time. He's got the angel Gabriel coming to Mary, and he's got shepherds, and the angels showing up to the shepherds and them running in. Luke takes his time telling story. Matthew, he's like, let's get on with it. See, there's no mention of the things like a manger or the shepherds or even Gabriel visiting Mary. The story just seems to be on fast forward for Matthew. But it's from Matthew that we learn about Joseph and his reaction to Mary being pregnant. And we learn about the wise men who showed up sometime after Jesus was born. You see, Joseph finds out that Mary's pregnant. And he knows a couple things. One, he knows how babies are made. And he also knows that that baby isn't his. And so he decided to not marry her, to not go through with the wedding. They're engaged right now. And he decides to just back away quietly, to not publicly shame her. That is, until an angel shows up unexpectedly and makes him rethink everything. Then, keep fast forwarding, in chapter 2, these foreigners, these wise men, show up to the palace looking for a new king. Check it out in Matthew chapter 2, verses 1 and 3. It says, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea. During the time of King Herod, Magi from the east came to Jerusalem and asked, "Where is the one who has been born King of the Jews? We saw a star when it rose and have come to worship him." Matthew tells us the men looking for Jesus were magi, is the word that he uses. And these would have been Eastern astronomers or astrologers. They were the same thing back then. And so these foreigners show up, these astrologers, and they show up to the Jewish capital at the Jewish palace looking for a Jewish king. Why? The most obvious answer of why they ended up there was because of a star. They were stargazers, and they saw a star in the distance, and they decided, yeah, let's go. Let's pack up what we have. And tradition tells us it was 3 wise men. It probably was a whole group of them. But Matthew isn't just telling us because of a star. He doesn't think that horoscopes are the best way to predict birth stories. No, he's actually making a political statement here. Foreign astrologers show up to a Jewish palace because there's a new king. And this king isn't just the king of the Jews like Herod. This new king is something more. Matthew wants us to see that Jesus is not just a king to the Jews, but he's also the king to the world. He's the Messiah, the Savior. You see, the predictions of the Messiah in the Old Testament said he'd bring God's justice and peace to the world. A new king was a threat to the old king, Herod. And so Herod's trying to figure things out. And so he calls his own wise men and says, "Hey, what do the prophecies say? You need to tell me." And they figure out, oh, it says Bethlehem. It's in Bethlehem that he's supposed to be born. And so he pulls the Magi aside secretly, and he tells them what he just learned. And he tells them about the prophecy of the Messiah being born in Bethlehem. And so he tells them where they can go and where they might be able to find this king. Check out Matthew 1:9 through 11. Starting in verse 9, it says, "After they had heard the king, they went on their way, and the star they had seen when it rose went ahead of them until it stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they were overjoyed. On coming to the house, they saw the child with his mother, Mary, and they bowed down and worshipped him. Then they opened their treasures and presented him with the gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh." So the Magi leave Jerusalem. They go about a few miles north to Bethlehem. And when they see the star again, so the star apparently disappeared, comes back, they're overjoyed to see it. And then they see the child, and we don't know exactly how. There's a lot of tradition around how old Jesus would have been. Some say 6 to 18 months, others say maybe he was a toddler. But the point being is that these men knew that they needed to find where that star was leading them. And they also knew that they needed to bring gifts fit for a king. And so they opened up their luggage and they pulled out these gifts. Gold, money, that's always a nice thing to have. Frankincense or incense, and finally myrrh. See, this was their best stuff. And I can only imagine as we look ahead how helpful something like gold was, because like 2 verses later, Joseph and Mary and Jesus end up having to flee from Herod, who's decided to kill all the children boys 2 years old or younger. And so they flee to Egypt. And so I can only imagine how helpful that was. When our first child, Will, was born, Julie and I, like I said earlier, we were broke. And we had a family friend at the hospital who came and saw Will, and he gave us a card. We're like, oh, that's really thankful. And we're really thankful for that. And he left, and we opened it up, and inside was $100 bill. I mean, at that point, it may as well have been $1,000 because, like I said, we were broke. That money made all the difference in the world. These are gifts that are practical, and I'm sure Mary and Joseph used their best stuff to give good things to Jesus. But why does Matthew include these stories in the Christmas story? That's the question we want to ask. I mean, I get Mary and her learning, and I get the shepherds, but why fast forward to when they're in a house at Bethlehem that the wise men just show up to? And I think the reason is this. I think it's because Christmas isn't just about a baby. It's not just about the birth of Jesus. In fact, the church for the first 100 or so years actually didn't really celebrate Christmas all that much. It was all about the cross and the resurrection. It was all about Easter. But I think for us, we look and realize that Christmas isn't just about a baby. It's about a larger story. And Matthew wants us to look at the whole story. This story gives us hope. And I think for us, because this year is not the end of the story, it's just the beginning. That one day we're going to look back on 2020 and all the hardships that we faced this year, and it'll just be a story that we tell. And we'll say, remember when? Remember when we spent 2 weeks in our house and we drove each other crazy? Do you remember when we couldn't go into a restaurant and sit down? Do you remember when? Do you remember when? And maybe this Christmas, we need to remember when. We need to remember when a baby was born, God in the flesh. We need to remember when a star shone so brightly that wise men from a foreign country would come to visit him. We need to think about the whole story. It's not just about a bright star then, but about the star that would give way to darkness when Jesus was on a cross and crucified, when the skies grew black. He would trade that gold in, not for a crown of gold, but one made out of thorns. And his throne wouldn't be in a palace like the wise men thought, but his throne would be on a cross with his arms stretched out. See, this cross brings us hope, even now. Christmas isn't the whole story. It's just the start of a story. And the whole story is one of how the unexpected always, always gives way to hope. We all need hope because, who knows what 2021 will bring? But the good news is that our hope isn't in this year or next. Our hope is in Jesus, the King of the unexpected. You see, Christmas is about expecting the unexpected. I think we have to learn that because we can handle the unexpected because no matter what happens, Jesus is King. And that takes a bigger view. That takes a whole story view. You see, Jesus' entire ministry is about embracing the unexpected. He healed the lame and the sick, and he cast out demons. He even spits in the mud at one point and slaps it on a blind man's eyes to heal him. Jesus embraced the unexpected. And Jesus also embraced his death on a cross that was unexpected for the disciples. See, the Messiah wasn't supposed to die. He was supposed to kick the Romans out of the country, kick them to the curb. But the same way that his death was unexpected, so was his resurrection. And now the amazing thing is that he invites you and me into his story, into something new. You see, Christmas is about learning to expect the unexpected, but it's also about an invitation that he invites you and me to follow him, to find rest in his teachings, to die to ourselves and to pick up our own cross and follow after him, and not follow for more rules, but to follow to find rest in the midst of chaos. You see, Matthew goes on to tell us in chapter 11, verse 28 and 29, this is Jesus talking. He says, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls." Look at verse 32. He says, "For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." You see, folks, church, Christian, Jesus, the gentle King, is inviting you, and he's waiting for you. This Christmas, we celebrate his birth And like the Magi, we give gifts to each other and we give our best. So the question for us is, what's the best that we can give to Jesus? Because the one thing that he wants isn't a gift, but it's us. It's our lives. See, the Christmas story is so beautiful because in the backwaters of the Roman Empire, the world was changed forever. There, in an animal enclosure, a small baby was born to a young, broke couple. Shepherds and wise men, the poor and the rich were all welcome to come. And the same is true for us today. And again, this is what I love about the Christmas story. It teaches us to welcome the unexpected, but as a beautiful invitation, not a dreaded interruption. This Christmas and on into 2021, keep this in mind. Nothing will be certain except for this: his promises, his faithfulness, and his unending love. And so my prayer for you, church, is that may you see that Jesus is inviting you now to find rest from this year and next at his feet. And may you find comfort in knowing that our story of chaos is not new to this world. And no matter what happens in this life, Jesus is still inviting the broken and the outcast into his home. So like the wise men, come to him by whatever route you can and with the best gifts that you can find. Merry Christmas, church.
If only in my dream.